Hi folks, Matt Easton here. So as many of you know, as well as European weapons, swords mainly, that I collect, I also collect Indo-Persian swords and weapons, and I have a big interest actually in the history of the Indian subcontinent, warfare in India, weapons in India, and martial arts of India. I think it's a fascinating area, and there's lots of research to be done actually, and there's some very interesting historical treatises which maybe are out there to be found. More about that in the future possibly. But in my collecting and buying and selling, and obviously I have a website, antiqueswords.co.uk, I come across various objects that come into my hands. Sometimes they come with job lots of stuff that I've got from house clearances, or someone's offered them to me directly, or antique auctions, antique shops, this kind of thing. And very occasionally I come across something weird, and I've had a few variations of the Indian tulwar over the years, the tulwar being the typical Indian curved sword, and there are many variations of it. However, every now and again something comes along that I haven't seen before, and this is one of those. So first off, the blade isn't bright green, that's the scabbard, and yes, it is a small stubby sword. However, it's not quite what you might imagine. It's not simply a short double-edged tulwar. That's right. It has one of the wackiest blades I think I've ever seen, like ever, on anything. First thing to say about it is, yes, it is fairly short. What is that? About 18 inches, I guess. Okay. The second thing is, yes, it has teeth on it, and it looks very much like the nose of a sawfish, I believe it's called, rather than a swordfish. But you find them in the Pacific, and they're usually attached on the end of the nose like that. Yeah, it kind of looks like that, and you can't help but think that that's kind of what inspired it. Is it a modern curio? I don't think so. It's certainly got age patina to it that I don't think is at all faked, or could have been very easily faked. The hilt is certainly got some age to it as well. If I had to date it based on all of the Indian weapons and tulwars that I've owned, based on the general patina and style of the fairly basic tulwar grip, I'd say it's probably late 19th century, could even be about 1900, but it's not going to be much later than that. I wouldn't think any after the First World War, I wouldn't think. But so the blade is essentially not like a normal blade. You'll notice I'm quite happy to sort of grab it because it's not really sharp, although these extensions are individually a bit like little kind of axe blades. So the normal edge, as it were, going along here, the straight bit, is essentially blunt. It's not edged like a sword would be. But these projections on the end are each individually like a little hatchet, and they are indeed sort of edged like an axe would be. They're not super sharp, although they could be made sharper, and they're not completely regular as well. You'll notice they're kind of opposite each other as we go up here, but they get a bit out of sequence as you go along and then kind of come back into sequence again. And the other thing to mention about it, as well as having these little projections, kind of little, almost like little axe blades sticking out of the blunt blade, the end is kind of wedge-like. Again, it's a bit like a kind of axe blade. But the other main thing to mention about it is you'll notice there are some grooves along here. They're actually not grooves. The blade is hollow. And inside there, I don't know if you're... I think you can probably just about see. There are little ball bearings. And if I don't have something to hand at the moment, but if I grab something pointy and push it in there, you can actually move those ball bearings. Now, due to age, they don't slide up and down very freely anymore. However, you can push them up and down with a knife point or something like that. But very clearly, these are referred to in written sources being put into Indian sword blades of various types. And what happens, of course, is if you were swinging a blade that has moving ball bearings in it, and I believe these are sometimes known as Tears of Allah or something like that, but don't quote me on that, I'm not 100% sure that's true. When you swing it, the ball bearings naturally will swing towards the end of the weapon and give more inertia to the strike. Now in this case, first of all, it's a very short bladed weapon, so it's not going to make much difference anyway. But secondly, they're such tiny ball bearings that the weight movement is just insignificant. So in the case of this weapon, I'm not saying that the ball bearings, and even mercury is mentioned in other swords, might not have the effect of adding more power to the strike in longer swords and in other specific weapons, but in this weapon's case I don't think that's what they're there for. I think they're there as a kind of, maybe it's religious, maybe it's ornamentation, maybe it's showing off, I don't know. So what is this thing for? Well, very clearly, yes, you could hit someone with it. But I have a hunch that that's actually not primarily what it's for. If I just grab a toolbar. Right, so here's a toolbar. I suspect, and I have a hunch, that what this is actually for is it's for the left hand. And I think it's for people who either don't want to carry a shield or a buckler around, or just want to use something different. And I suspect that this is the Indian equivalent to a sword, what's sometimes known as a sword breaker, but I would rather they be called sword grabbers, a type of mangosh or left-hand dagger. And to me, that's what this is. It's very, to me, it's not particularly offensive, but it would be quite good at catching and defending opponents' blows, because of course a opposing blade, and I'm not going to hit them hard because this is a nice quality Wootz toolbar, but that blade will go in there, and once you've defended with the thing, you've essentially got quite a good bind against the opponent's blade. It's not to say it will grab the opponent's blade, and I certainly don't think you could break an opponent's blade with it, but what I do think is it's a fairly substantial, heavy object, and having those teeth will assist in binding and controlling the opponent's blade for long enough that you can bring your blade into play. So there we go, an example of one of the many thousands of types of weird and wacky weapons that you get from the Indian subcontinent. I haven't found a parallel for this weapon, so I have no idea what it's called. I've got no idea whether there are other examples of this out there. I've never seen anything like it before, and I don't really know what it's for, but if I had to put money on something, my guess is it's a defending object, and you use a sword or an axe or mace or whatever in your other hand as an attacking object. To me, it screams defensive rather than offensive. There we go, guys. Cheers! Thank you for watching. Please subscribe and feel free to follow us on Facebook.